بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So, we're at meeting 24, still with the Islamic mindset, and today we'll be talking about the ease mindset and how is it that it's incorporated and integrated in the entire religion of Islam. And therefore, we have to understand it as not just a concept. It is an entire mindset that governs a lot of concepts. Um, and the first thing I want to talk about is that um, choosing ease over hardship. And the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, as we have mentioned before, when the mother Aisha were asked about the characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, or how he was, it was like a general question, how he was, like in general, like if you want to describe everything. So some people would say he was smart, he was this, and he was that. But the thing is that the wife of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, she mentioned that he was easy. He wasn't put between a two choices, but chose the easiest choice among those two if it wasn't a sin. So, and why this is important? Because when you want to understand the religion, it's not when you understand the Quran. It's when you understand the Quran throughout the eyes and the soul and the mind and the self of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revelated the Quran wasn't revelated alone at all. So some people might go to the Quran and they would understand the Quran alone without the lens of our Master Muhammad alayhi salam, and this will get them into trouble because how would how would you know that this is understood this way, not the other way? Because sometimes in the Quran, things can be understood in two ways, for example, or three ways. Therefore, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam is the distinction, is the differentiation between the right understanding and the wrong understanding, the good understanding and the better understanding. Because you could be hard on yourself, and it's not like a sin in itself to a certain point, but it's not the best thing. It is not the Islamic mentality. It is not the Islamic mindset. It is not the spirituality of Islam to be hard on yourself. So it's very important to understand that, as our teacher says, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam is the infallible translation or understanding of the Quran. And when we go to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, we see that he wasn't put in a situation to choose between two things, but chose the easiest one among them if it wasn't a sin. So let's understand this. What is this? Two choices if it wasn't a sin, okay? A third component. So what is a sin? Is it a sin only when you, for example, don't pray your obligatory prayers? Or is it a sin only when you, for example, talk badly or do something bad? Is it only a sin when you do a sinful act or not doing your obligations? Yes, but some people actually narrow it down to only the rituals. But the entire life is divided into, you know, some components or some, some levels, some layers. So at the most bottom, which is the worst, which is the prohibited. The one above it is the hated. So it's not prohibited, but it's hated. So for example, prohibited things like what? Like for example, lying, drinking alcohol, eating pork, killing, um, scamming people, and so on and so forth. What about the hated things? Things like, for example, you're going to a meeting and you ate onions. It is not prohibited, but is hated because, now your smell will be very bad and you will be, annoying people because it's hard, it's hurtful. Like, that the smell of the onions and you talking in their faces, like it's bad. So it's not prohibited, but it is hated. And then so we have the prohibited, then on top of it we have the hated, on top of it we have the allowed. It's permissible. It's the general life. Would I sit? Yeah, you could. It's allowed. It's anything and everything, normally. Do I open the door? You could. Do I drink water? You could. Do I do this and that? It's the general decision that was left for us to do, which is the entire thing, except for the prohibited and the obligatory. So everything. And then you have the beloved thing. Beloved things, for example, you could, for example, you know, you don't have to, but you could give charity. Is it a good thing? Yeah. Is it a beloved thing? Yes. But is it a must? No, it's not a must. Things that are beloved, but they're not obligated. Okay. And then on top of it, which are the obligated things, the obligations, the things that I don't have a choice in them. It's not my choice to decide. I have, for example, to respect my parents. I don't have to obey them. That's a huge difference. I don't have to obey them, but I have to respect them. For example, the five daily prayers. I have to do them. It's not a choice. That's why it's called obligation. Means I do not have a choice in them. God chose for me the things I need to do. Now, those kind of, we talked about some rituals, but another thing in life is, for example, for a person who is sustaining themselves, work, or for a man who is sustaining his family, he has a responsibility. Going to work is an obligation. It is not just a beloved thing you do or you could do or not do it. It is an obligation. Okay. So there are things in life that we overlook, but they are actually very important. As said, for man, is for example, to go to work to sustain his family. So that is an obligation. So choosing between two options, unless one of them is a sin, for a man choosing to work or not to work, and choosing not to work because it's easiest, he cannot do that. He has to be doing, going to work. Otherwise, it's a sin. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wouldn't do anything sinful. Then what does that mean? Like, can you give us an example choosing between two things? Okay, let's imagine we have a project. We're working on any project. What is a project? A project is anything quantitative that has a time. It's gonna start this time, it's gonna end this time. So, any activity that has a quantity and time. So, and let's talk, for example, about a project at work. We want to do a product or a feature or something, whatever. And so we are, planning for it, and we see two ways. I can do it this way, way number one, or I can do it way number two. Way number one, the approach number one, will produce the product, and approach number two will produce the product. They have the same results, but approach number one is easier, and approach number two is just harder for no reason, or harder, it's harder. It has some more complications without any benefits. So would I go for approach number two because it's harder, because I need to be tough on myself? No, it's actually the quite opposite. As both of them resulting the same results, I would need to go with approach number two if I'm a Muslim to follow the mentality of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. So it's teaching us it's a mentality. Both of them have the same results, but one of them is harder. I wouldn't go with the harder one. I would go with the easier one. He wasn't put between two choices, but chose the easiest one among them if it wasn't a sin. What is a sin? I need the result. The result need to be on a specific specifications. I cannot, undergo that specification. So the specification or the results I'm putting there are my measure. If I go under that, it's a sin, means I am under delivering. Then I can't do that. But I have two ways, two approaches. One is hard, one is soft. What is hard? I'm sorry. One is, easy. So I choose the easier one. Why would I get myself into hardship? Why would I get myself into trouble? Why would I get myself into doing something and I have an easier one? So what is that? That's a mentality. You don't go for hardship. You don't go for things that to prove that, you can suffer and bear it. That's not the mentality of this religion at all. That's not the mentality of the last religion revelated to humankind. So choosing hardship, that's the opposite of the mentality of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. Therefore, always choosing ease over hardship. Always. But as I said, choosing ease but not under delivering, and choosing ease and not um falling short, choosing ease but not doing a wrongful thing or a sinful thing. Okay, that's huge difference. So because some people would understand it a different way. They would understand that I can just slack down and do nothing. That's not what it meant at all. Okay. Um, and from that, we have another kind of syntax saying obligation is according to capacity. So the first sentence was choosing ease over hardship. The next sentence is obligation is according to capacity. This religion would never, ever ask you to do something that is over your capacity, ever. And therefore, you would see that with fasting, it is an obligation. It's one of the five pillars of Islam. But if you are sick and doctor says you cannot fast, fasting will harm your life, you wouldn't fast because it's above your capacity. You need to do the things that are according to your capacity, but an actual capacity, not a pretended capacity. Not because I don't like to be hungry. That's not capacity, that's liking. That's like what I want. No, we're not talking about wanting because as long as we said obligation, obligations override what we want. But obligations doesn't override capacity. That's the mercy of Allah. That's the mercy of the Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, um, and another thing is that capacity is measured person to person. So it's not a general thing. There is a general capacity for all humans, but normally capacity is measured case by case. So for each person, it is different. For example, in when you go to pray, if for example you're going to and I'm talking about obligation because all the other things other than obligations are not even considered in this because they are optional. You could just ignore it whenever you want. I'm merely talking about obligation here. So talking about obligation prayers, the five daily prayers, one of the pillars, as we learned before, that you need to be standing. So when, when you're in an obligation prayer and, for example, you're dizzy, well, that's override the capacity. It's above your capacity to stand. Yes, standing is a pillar in the prayer, but now you override it. Now you need to sit down so you don't fall down and hit your head. So this religion is never gonna put you in hardship, never. And it will always consider um, the thing we talked about before, which is the five major objectives of Islam: to preserve life, then to preserve intellect, then to preserve religion, then to preserve dignity, then to preserve honor or things. Okay, so it'll always respect human because it was regulated for humans to live a happy life, to live in this life to the point where my Shaykh, may Allah be pleased with him, wrote a book, um, I think called it Hubbul Haya, loving life. He didn't say loving this life, he said loving life in general. Because we are life. Whenever you are alive, whenever you are aware and living, that is you. So loving life is loving yourself. And Allah honored you, means Allah honored life. And therefore we have those mentality. That's why we understand from the Prophet Muhammad alayhi his mentality. Also, another thing is that ease, when you are, in ease, things will be better. Because if you do something that is over your capacity or very, very near to your capacity, especially for optionary things, you later would not continue in it. Because when you go to the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah do not obligate a self except for um, its vastness or near to al-wus' in Islam. When we say something is wasi', means something is wide, something is vast. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لا يكلف الله نفسا. Allah didn't say, لا يكلف الله طاقة مقدرة. Allah said, لا يكلف الله. Allah do not obligate a self. Did not say a capacity. It did not say energy. Did not say ability. And when we're talking about self, we consider a lot of other things other than capacity. We consider mentality, we consider energy, we consider the psychological state, a lot of things. It's alive. It is not just a mere power, that is being considered, mere ability that is being considered. No, it's Allah said nafsan, and Allah obligates a self according to its mere limits. No, it's its vastness. Means before you reach to that limit, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا, Allah do not obligate itself, but with what? With its what? With its limits? No, not its limits. وسعها, what is capable of its vastness, what is capable of, you know, its capacity, the vastness of its capacity. So how do I understand this in Islam? I understand it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't obligate you to reach your utmost limits. Because imagine you're doing something and then something came that is not in the plans. It will break your back. So it is like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us to to keep a little bit of keep a little bit of, how can I say that? You know, a little bit of ability. So like when you work, do not do 100%. Like for example, if you want to go and talk to a person and you know that person is annoying, do not reach to your utmost level of bareness and ability to handle that person. And then if something happens, you will snap. No, always go to 80%. When you go to 80%, what happens there is that you have some, wiggle room, so that if something happens, you have a little bit of wiggle room there. You don't snap immediately. You don't break your back immediately because you got, everything got to the limits, and now it's just one push and you're falling. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that Allah do not obligate you to your utmost levels, to your utmost limits. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligating you so that you have still vastness in your life. Okay. So this subject was, it's a subject we talked about last um the 23rd, but it is important. It's very important to understand. Next lesson, inshallah, we'll be talking about a very important mindset also, which is very important in life. Not just because we need to understand that religion came for us to teach us how to live. It is not to be lived in mosques. That's part of it, just part of it, to being in mosque, or to being, in what people call a religious state, or a religious atmosphere. Because truly, a religious state or a religious atmosphere, it is life. When do you be pious? When do you be a good person? That's religious. Being a good person is religion. In everything, with everyone, in every time and in every place. So being just limited to being religious in a religious gathering, that is very, very nearsighting. So the next one, inshallah, we'll be talking about, which is the most beloved deeds to Allah, are those that are consistent, even if it's small. أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدومها وإن قل. This is very important. This is a mentality. This is a mindset of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi, and it's religious in all aspects, in rituals and in life. And it's actually one of the things that gets into management. Like, if you want to go to see where it's get involved, This saying actually gets into the mere management itself. When you manage a project, when you manage your life, it's about consistency. So we'll talk about that inshallah in the next lesson. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay, cool. See you inshallah in the next lesson. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.